Hello everyone. Today we're gonna look a bit at how webhooks work in Bluestone PIM. So setting up the actual webhook and then consuming the webhook events that result from that. First of all, what's a webhook? The webhook is a way to signal to systems outside of the PIM or any system what's happening in the PIM, right? So we might consume this, for example, from the ecom, right? So when a product changes in the PIM, we want to consume that. We want to replicate that change in our ecom platform, for example, or any other integration, right? If we're communicating regarding stock levels or anything like that. And in Bluestone, it's easy to set up the webhooks here in the UI. So if you have the right permissions, you can just go in here and you can add a webhook. You set the URL, and this is where should this event or events from this webhook be sent. Okay, so this might then be to your, let's say, Shopify or other ecom systems. And for this case, I will just use webhook.site, which is a test site that you can also use to try out your webhooks. It's just going to listen on this URL for any event being sent to it. So I'm just going to copy the URL from here. I'm going to put that into here. But here you could imagine this would then be my Shopify and something like that. Change that back. Okay. Secret key, this is just to validate on the receiving side that this message actually comes from Bluestone, but for this test case, I just put 123, enable the endpoint, and then we can choose what we want to receive here. So do we, for example, want to know when a product is created in the PIM? Is that when we want to receive the notification? We can subscribe to many of these events as well. So maybe I want to know when a product has been created and when a product name has changed. And you will see other examples of events here. So we can, of course, listen to any changes of attribute values here also. Here we can listen to updates to catalogs and categories. And then we see something interesting here. So we can listen also to when a new sync has been done. So what does that mean? Well, it means that all these boxes that we can check here, this is for changes in the Bluestone PIM MAPI, the management API. As soon as it's changed in the PIM, this notification will be sent. So when I change the name, without syncing that change, the event will be sent. And many times if we're listening downstream, so the ecom, we don't want to replicate that change until we have published, because publishing the product in Bluestone PIM, that's when the change should go live downstream. And that is why we have this as well. So we can listen for when a new sync has been done. And that's when we notify the downstream system, and we can go and actually see what was changed, right? So how this works is that the webhook, it will send the ID of that sync. So every time we sync, that sync action gets an ID. With that ID, we can then go back to Bluestone and ask for, well, what were the products that were affected by this sync? And what were those changes, right? We need actually 2 API calls there. So we first get the list of products, and then per product, we can then go and see the changes or the current state of the product, which is usually what we want to do. Then we can have delta logic in between there, but let's not go in to all of that. Let's start with these that we have clicked here. So these are management API notifications we're going to receive. But just keep that in mind, and later on we can see how this works. Okay, so I'm going to save this. Now the webhook is active in a couple seconds here. Okay, webhook is active, and we can go back into the PIM here. And just a few words on that published management API versus public API. So you can see that these products are published already. But a change here in, for example, the name, if I want to spell gray differently, this change doesn't go live, for example, in an e-commerce now. We still need to publish that, right? So the user has made a change in here. We can see then in the history of the product that this is still waiting to be synced. I can see this here, what is not synced for this product. For example, the update of the name here from gray to gray, different spelling, is not yet synced. But our webhook will have already sent this change because right now I'm listening for management API changes, right? So if we go to the webhook.site, you can see that we have received an event here. Bluestone has sent us an event to this external system, and it says that there's a name change. It's an update of name, and this is the old value, gray, spelled with E. This is the new value, and this is basically the delta then, right? All the new value. It also tells us what context was this done in. It's in the English context. All right. Going back here, we can try another kind of change. Let me go into this neon lime variant of this shoe, and I'm gonna change the weight here. So changing that to 330. Okay, let's switch back to webhook.site, and this is always interesting to see when it comes through. There we go, and just clicking here. This is one thing with webhook events to be aware of, right? It's not possible to guarantee the order they arrive in. Or exactly how fast they arrive. So that's just doesn't have anything to do specifically with Bluestone's webhook events, but in general with webhook events. And that's why you want to go to the source of truth usually. So you get this as an indication something changed, then you go to source to get those kind of the latest accurate value, right? Here it says that yes, we have an attribute update of the value, and the attribute type that this is in regards to is an integer. Old value 300, new value 330. That's the update, again in the English context. This is also giving us some other affected context because we might have fallback contexts active, which means that these other two contexts here, they are falling back onto the English one if there is no translation. That's also a detail that we don't need to dive too much into. Okay, so now we've seen how these events are being sent and what they include for a name change and also for a change of an attribute value, in this case the weight. What can we do from here? Well, let's now create another webhook that's going to send the publish event, okay? Because you can see these are now waiting to be published, these changes that we've done. They are still only in the management API. We haven't pushed them to the public API. So let's do that. But first, let's set up the webhook and create a new one. It could also be in the same one, but just for separation of concerns and so on, I prefer to keep it separate here. However, I'm going to use the same webhook.site URL for this. Setting up a new webhook in Bluestone, enabled, and I'm only going to listen to this new sync done. All right. And now let's go ahead and sync. So I'm going to choose all the 4 products and sync for the English context. Let's hope we have no validation issues. It's fine. The sync is done. Okay. We can switch over and we see that we have the new product sync done, event received on the outside here in webhook.site. This is the ID for this sync, and I grab that. And now we can, via the Bluestone PIM APIs, retrieve more information here. So let me just switch over to here. Okay, so now I'm going to go to use this endpoint for, I want to know what products were changed in this sync. So I'm just going to put that ID in here. This, of course, will be done programmatically. Usually you have a function doing this, not manually, but just for the sake of it here, let's see what we have. And there we go. So we're seeing the products that were changed in this sync, and also the diff type, meaning was it changed, was it added, might have been a new product, right? Or archived. If it was archived, we might then remove it, for example, from our econ and so on. And here it's a change, and we can then grab this. This is the ID of the product to go and see the latest version of the product, which is what we want to replicate then in the econ or any downstream system. Okay, so that is basically what the flow is like for retrieving updates on a sync done, getting the ID, and then getting what type of changes were done there. Could also be good to mention that all of these things, creating the webhook that you saw me do in the UI, you can also do via the APIs. So you can do it from the outside here, no problem, and also manage them. So everything available via the APIs. Okay, so I hope that was helpful to see a bit more about how webhooks are created, managed, and also the events, how they are consumed outside of Bluestone.